Hello friends, it's Nancy from Astrology and Angel Mediums, and today I have another weekly check-in reading for the week of Sunday, April 26th through Saturday, May 2nd. Now, happy Taurus season. I don't know if I said it in my last video. I may not have, but for real. Uranus has finally, hopefully, moved out of Taurus indefinitely because a girl is tired of Uranus and Taurus. And I feel like it'll be much more comfortable in Gemini, which can kind of lead to a lot of advancements in technology and medicine and just different things that we may experience. The other thing with Uranus and Gemini is that sometimes it can kind of bring forth a lot of big shifts and unexpected changes when it comes to how we view the world and what is going on in our world. I mean, any of you guys that are into astrology will kind of have an inkling of what may happen, because again, astrology can be predictive, but it really is more about looking at patterns and learning how to read how these patterns may possibly play out, right? At the end of the day, we're all people and we're actively choosing different things, and sometimes we have people in positions of power that make decisions that affect all of us. So let's kind of see what we have for this week. So let's get into what do we need to know this week as a collective. We have Temperance. All right, now what do we need to do as a collective this week? We have the Tower. All right, what do we need to release as a collective? We have the Maiden of Wands, which I think is going to be the Page of Wands. And then what do we need to contemplate as a collective? We have the Ten of Pentacles. All right, and I'm using this Goddess of Love Tarot. I felt like it'd be perfect, for Taurus season, Venusian ruled kind of energy. All right, so let's kind of talk about what we have going on with the reading this week. So we have a couple of major cards. First one is Temperance. Now, to me, Temperance can be a realization and understanding of what needs to kind of be at the forefront of where we may need a little bit of patience, where we may need to be a little bit more aware of like the different things that are kind of happening that need to kind of be brought into a new understanding, a new level of what we have going on. Temperance is Sagittarius energy, right? So it can be very much this like, I want things to look a certain way and be a certain way. So it is asking us, what do we need to do in order for us to kind of have that happen? When I think of Temperance, I think that it is a really redefining kind of energy in the sense of we are trying to get ourselves ready for the next thing that's trying to shift, the next thing that is going to feel maybe a little bit unexpected, a little bit challenging, maybe even require us to kind of look at what is it within ourselves that is going to shift and no longer is working and operating the way that it should. I think of Temperance as bringing together two very different elements and creating something new. So I think with what we need to know this week is that while things may not look like they're making a lot of sense on the surface, or that they're not really coming together the way that we had anticipated, I think that Temperance is kind of saying like, just be patient, just kind of look at what is coming together, why it's coming together, look at, what it is that is being required of us right now. Like, where do we need a little bit more patience? Where do we need to be a little bit more understanding and more focused on like, what does this really mean for me long term? And how is this going to look for me and my situation? Now, I do like the stuff that she has written in her guidebook. So I'm going to kind of like reflect and kind of talk about what she has in here for temperance. So the goddess here is Mary Magdalene. The astrological correspondence is Sagittarius. So we're here to find balance between heart and mind, spirit and flesh, sex and love. This isn't about disconnecting from reality, but rather integrating dualities through unconditional love. Temperance offers that balance of one foot on the terrestrial and one in the celestial, a balance of force and form as embodied by Mary Magdalene. Mary was Jesus' most beloved disciple and embodies the energy of temperance in her commitment to love, sacred sexuality, and her beloved. She represents gnosis, the realization of divinity through the self, heart, and communion with the divine. Surrender to the tides of life by aligning with the mysteries of the universe. Temperance invites in balance and grounding. Find a middle ground between two opposing energies, forces, choices, or beliefs with the alchemical key that transmutes any blocks, forces, and patterns into wisdom, faith, and guidance. Make the mundane world part of your spiritual practice. Temperance also reveals the equilibrium between truth and perception, love and lust. Temperance can be thought of as the lunar and solar qualities of the self uniting in the act of sacred sex, when two opposing forces come together through the flesh in search of something greater. So, an affirmation is, I embrace the divine dualities and I'm grounded in the love that results from the sacred alchemy. So I think kind of taking what she had to say about kind of bringing into balance these two different things, that can seem very like on opposite ends of the spectrum. I think with what we need to know is that we need to find a better way to kind of meet in the middle in different things. And I know here what's going on in, on our political stage in the United States, there is a lot of this extremism and a lot of this one side blaming the other side, and I feel like temperance being what we need to know this week is that maybe it is kind of requiring us to kind of look within and see, okay, I may not always understand how or what is going on in the situation, but there is something to be said for what I need to do with this energy, which is to kind of come together, find a way to bring things back into balance and kind of merge these two very different things. And these two very, I guess in a lot of ways, it's like having the patience to kind of bring together these different things. So I think it's going to be a week where we are trying to be a little bit more aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it when it comes to blending these two very different things within our lives, within our, situations, in our circumstances, and how we're viewing the things around us. Now, card number 2 is going to be what we need to do. So here we have the Tower. Now, I know this is one of these cards that tends to kind of scare people off and kind of intimidate them. The Tower is, to me, an invitation for us to have a breakdown, or to find the breakthrough in the breakdown, I guess is really what I want to say. This is going to be unexpected, unintended, kind of intense sort of energy, especially for those of us that are very rooted in what we know and what we understand, and have a very fixed way of being in our lives. And as someone with a lot of fixed signs in their chart, I can tell you I don't deal the best with change. I invite it in some ways, but I always feel like it has to be on my own terms. And so this can feel like right now we're wanting to kind of storm the tower, basically, just have a lot of upheaval, a lot of change. We're just tired of how things have been, and we're just looking at it from this one angle of okay, let's just destroy everything that's been, because it hasn't been operating the way that we would like or the way that it should. And so we have a lot of this kind of back and forth sort of energy with this. So I think with the Tower, and what we need to do is that right now we have to just kind of look at what is trying to break away, what is trying to kind of, not saying it's trying to fall out of what we understand, but maybe it's time for us to have an understanding that not everything is going to look the way that we would like for it to look. And it's not always going to make sense in the way that we think it should. So let's look at what she wrote for the Tower. So Ereshkigal is the goddess, and the astrological correspondent is Mars. So the Tower is one of the most intense cards of the tarot, and it often gets a bad rap. But the spiritual path isn't one where you avoid pain and suffering. The phallic goddess of destruction urges you into the shadowy depths to witness your truth when pleasure and safety are ripped away. Who do you become when you're in the discomfort of the underworld? The Sumerian goddess of Ereshkigal, the dark twin of the goddess of sex and war, Inanna, embodies these destructive and transformative aspects. Tower represents the removal of false ego and false power. It can mean the falling and crumbling of old beliefs and attitudes, the destruction before creation. It is also the warrior goddess, the underworld journey, and the ego destruction. It is a heartbreak that catalyzes the healing of old wounds and patterns. When this card appears, embrace your power and strength and work with the annihilation. So an affirmation is, I'm a dark goddess of love. I embrace pain and pleasure as a path to liberation. So looking at what we need to know, we have temperance, right? We maybe are trying to kind of mix these two very different things going on in our lives and trying to blend them together. And then we have the Tower that's kind of like, all right, we're done. We're done with how things have been. Status quo is no longer sustainable for us. There's something that needs to shift. There's something that needs to change. And with it being Mars energy, I know Mars moved into Aries, which is its domicile. It's where it's the most comfortable. It's this kind of energy of like, let's just light shit on fire. Let's go. And so there is a little bit of this intensity of spurring us into action, spurring us into what are we doing? What needs to shift? What needs action right now? Now, if we look at what we need to release, we have the Maiden of Wands, which is the Page of Wands. Now, pages to me can be this sort of energy of I'm ready to kind of get out into the world, but I'm not quite sure how that's going to look. I don't have a lot of experience. I think that there's a lot of opportunity that kind of opens up with this. Now, with this being what we need to release is maybe this sense of, I don't really know what I'm going to do. I don't really know what it's going to look like. I don't really know how it's going to be when I get there. Now, wands are fire, right? So we have a lot of stuff that is in Aries astrologically at the moment. So while it may be Taurus season, it's not going to feel the same as typical Taurus season because not a lot of stuff is going to be in Taurus. We do have Saturn in Aries, we have Neptune in Aries. And I think with this being what we need to release is that when I think of this Saturnian energy in the sky right now, I feel like there's this like pulse of like, I want to do something. But Saturn is going to be a little bit more restrictive. It's going to be very much more of this like, like, hold on, what are you trying to do? Like, where's your contingency plan? Like, while Aries energy can be very impulsive and kind of driven by what they want to do. So with having a little bit of this dichotomy between Saturn and, Aries, and then also throwing in the mix of Neptune and Aries, where the delusion of Neptune and Pisces no longer is standing. It is kind of saying like, all right, we have to kind of release this sort of energy. It's not serving anybody. So I think with the Page of Wands here, we're getting a little bit of this energy of like, this is not a time to feel like I'm just going to go off on my own. I'm just going to do my own thing. It doesn't matter if I don't have a plan. So I think what we need to release is a sense of, I'm just going to charge ahead. I think that while at some points in time, and maybe even this year, have felt a little bit more like it's okay to just kind of go out there and wing it, I think this kind of energy this week is kind of saying like, this is not the time to just kind of get out there and just do whatever. So let's see what she has for the Maiden of Wands. All right, so it is the Earth of Fire, right? I think with this being what we need to release, it's maybe saying like more of like the reverse meaning of maybe you need to take a second before a new adventure and realign with what is true, or re-examine your optimism to see if you're being honest or naive. Rebellion can be fun and necessary, but be sure you believe in what you're fighting for. So I think this week is that maybe we're having to kind of question like, well, I just want to charge ahead and do this one thing, but does it actually physically make sense overall? And that's the thing with a lot of Aries in the sky sometimes, is that we can be a little bit more impulsive. We can be a little bit more driven by what, calls us and our impulses, versus like really having a better understanding about like, what is it that we really need in order for things that like to be, not to say long lasting, but to really be in alignment with who we are and what we have going on, if that makes sense. All right. Now, if we move on to what we need to contemplate, we have the 10 of Pentacles upright. Now, the 10 of Pentacles to me can be very much this like reminder of all of our hard work, the culmination of everything that we've been doing, all of the seeds that we've been planting. It is very much talking about the groundwork that we've been putting in so many ways, whether it's with our space, with our lives, with ourselves, our physical body, the behaviors that we're exhibiting. Like there is a lot of this energy that feels like it's a little bit more slow moving. So maybe a lot of the things that we have been trying to kind of get to come, to pass or to come to fruition, we're finally starting to see a lot of those efforts kind of paying off and making sense. So I think with the 10 of Pentacles, what we need to contemplate is, what is the long term of what we've been doing? What is it that we have really been focusing on so far? And what is it that we've been growing? What is it that we have here? What sort of things make the most sense for what we have at this time? So let's look at what we have for the 10 of Pentacles in here. So this is the astrological correspondence of Mercury and Virgo. So the 10 of Pentacles is the last of the minor cards, a microcosmic version of the world, and a vision of enchantment grounded in the earth. It is a blessing of all the work you've done to get wherever the hell you are right now. Look around to see the sacredness in what you've manifested. This card exposes you to the truth of the magic in the material and the mundane. This card is about material successes, but it's also about your legacy. Consider how you'll take what you've grown and gained and pass it on, sharing the prosperity with those you love on earth and future generations. You want to ensure wealth for the spiritual ecosystem of which you are a part. So I think a lot of us are kind of thinking of our longevity, like how is our current existence sustainable for us long term? And that is something I really have been thinking about, because I'm like, what sort of conditions is this going to leave for my children? What sort of world am I leaving for people that may be, great grandchildren of mine or anything like that? So I've been really focusing on, what am I doing in my life that can kind of co-create a little bit more sustainability, that can kind of, I can show up in a very honest and real way that can help people, in the future, whether they are of my ancestry or not. Just, I've really been focusing on, what are we doing like at this like breakneck speed of like destroying the planet that we live on? Because at the end of the day, like this is home for all of us. And so, I don't know about you guys, but I've really been reconsidering a lot of different elements of my life that in some ways can feel very much like, well, this is comfortable and this is what I've been doing. So like, why do I have to change? And sometimes that's just not the way to operate. And that's not a good space to operate from, because in the long term, we all may suffer the consequences of one person that's like, I don't want to shift how I'm comfortable and what I'm doing in order to guarantee that it'll be better for everybody else. So I think that this week we may have a lot of changes, shifts that feel a little bit outside of our control or outside of our comfort zone. We also have a full moon in Scorpio. coming up on May 1st, I believe. So that can be something that can be very revelatory on what we have been experiencing here. There may be a lot of things that may feel like they're coming to the surface, and we may have this like realization. It's interesting because we have like serpents on 3 of the cards. So I feel like that's very Scorpio kind of energy, like the serpent kind of, coming to the surface or whatever of what we need to recognize and realize what is going on here. So and then we have a lot of roses too, which are a high vibrational flower, which, is typically associated with love and lust. But to me, they are this beautiful kind of energy that really reminds us, like, in order for us to have the beauty that we want in our lives, we have to really ensure we have the right conditions in our lives. So I think that this week can feel a little bit more like there's a lot of intensity, a lot of things that we're trying to kind of strike the balance on. And there may be an opportunity for us to look at, the legacy that we're leaving behind and what that means for us long term. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me. Let me know what you guys think of this deck. Please take care, stay safe, and as always, make good choices. Bye.